Why your English still sounds German and how to change that is the topic of today's LinkedIn Live. A very warm welcome to everybody who's watching. I'm Sandra Wood. I'm a German language coach and I help international professionals in Switzerland speak German confidently and fluently in a work and social environment. And with me today is my lovely colleague, Megan. Megan, can you describe the clients that you work with?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to do a part 2 following on from last time. So I work with German speakers mainly, improving their English to become more confident in the workplace and in meetings and presentations. So I do work with clients from all over the world, but I do have a soft spot for my German clients, which is why this is a great topic to talk about.
Yes, definitely. And we're following on from our previous session about Denglish, which was all about helping German native speakers become clearer in English. And this LinkedIn Live today is more about typical mistakes that one might make as a German speaker. And we're going to give you some really useful and practical tips here. So stay tuned for what's to come. Megan, could you maybe explain what this is going to be about?
Yeah, we really want to speak clearer English without any interference from German structures. I think when we have one language already, it's different from learning our native language because we often translate in our head. So we think, okay, how does this sound how I would say it? And then how can I translate it into another? So we really want to avoid that and speak the target language, in this case, English, more naturally, more how local people would speak, to be honest. So it would be great if you could share some examples in the comments. Last time we got some people involved, and that was really nice to see examples that they've witnessed in their English or German lives.
Yes, definitely. Please do comment or ask any questions that you may have. So this translating in your head that you just mentioned, could you give some quick examples of mistakes that German speakers might make?
Yeah, one of my favorite memories of being an au pair is that the host mum, she told me, "Oh, I become a new baby phone." And all of those words, I know them in English. And I actually had no idea what she was talking about. And then she showed it to me and I was like, oh, okay, you got a new baby monitor. And it made a lot more sense because of the words that were just translated quite literally.
Yeah.
And then another time I heard one of my students tell me, oh, my English is not the yellow of the egg. And again, and I was like, what are you talking about? This is not an expression. And I so slowly figured out that they meant, oh yeah, my English is not the best, but I manage. So these are two that spring to mind.
And of course, they're really tricky, especially the second one that you mentioned, idioms and sort of just phrases that we think we can just translate, but they're not necessarily clear because they don't maybe exist in the other language. And the become thing, that's what we call a false friend. So that can really lead to confusion. And we're going to cover quite a few of those today. But also, why do these mistakes happen? Obviously, the translating in the head, but what are some other reasons, Meg, that you could give to our viewers?
Yeah, I totally understand it. And I'm sure I do the same when I speak German. When you're speaking in a fast-paced environment, you're kind of under pressure and you revert to what you know because it feels familiar. And I think because German and English actually share a lot of vocabulary and structures, and we've kind of borrowed a lot of language from each other, it makes them really easy to mix because the familiarity, it's not something completely different. And yeah, I think instead of thinking directly in the target language, they think what they already know and go from there, which is not necessarily a bad technique. It's better to try, and it might be kind of close, but it actually might cause more confusion in the long run. Have you got any other reasons why you think it might happen?
Yes, so you already mentioned that the two languages share a lot of similarities, but actually often the grammar structures and so the sentence structure and the actual grammar rules, they differ more than what you might think. So you see something and it looks the same, but it actually doesn't work the same way, doesn't have the same meaning. So that's the tricky bit. So be careful there. And also, often I think it's difficult. If you live in a German-speaking country, you don't really hear a lot of authentic English. So the exposure isn't there. You work with textbooks, you consume a lot of material, but hearing the spoken English that you need to be able to pick up on these differences, that is maybe not always possible. So it can be a bit limiting when you live in a German-speaking country. Yes, so why don't we look at some examples? We just mentioned sentence structure, grammar rules. Anything about the word order that German speakers should be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. Took me a long time to figure out German word order, and it's just not the same. It doesn't work the same in English, especially with adverbs. This can cause confusion. So instead of saying like, I very like this, you would say, I like this very much, and it would go towards the end of the sentence. And then similarly, like with prepositions, they cause a lot of confusion because we think, okay, we know the verb, we know the preposition, let's just do the same. But it is, again, it doesn't work like that. And prepositions can be a really challenging topic for lots of learners.
Yes, I think in all languages, right? They are never the same. And I know that as a German speaker myself, I know there's something about sins and for example. Could you shed some light on that?
Yeah, so people often say we live here since 2 years, like seit 2 Jahren, because that's that we're using the same words in another language, but we need to say we've lived here for 2 years instead, or since 2 years ago, and really add that in just to show when something started and when it's now continuing. Yeah. I like the way that you talked about false friends before, and I think this is a really important topic, Sandra. We talked about bekommen, meaning to become, but it's actually to get. And also one that I've been hearing a lot recently is spenden. So instead of saying like, I donate money to charity, or I donate my clothes to a friend, people say that they spend money to a charity, which is incorrect, but I can see where it comes from,
Yes, and there's something which is maybe also a bit of a false friend, which is the word actually. It looks a bit like aktuell, but it can't be quite used in the same way at all, right?
No, so it means like something current or something up to date, like the news or something that's happening right now. So people might say like, actually, I live in Berlin since 5 years, which is a little bit strange because we would use that as a correction. Like you might think I live in Vienna, but actually I live in Berlin. So we would use it as a correction, and we would say instead, I've lived in Berlin for 5 years, or like I'm currently living in Berlin.
Yes, I think I've heard somebody say something about information and, saying, are these informations actual, as in, sind diese Informationen aktuell?
Yeah, this is a really good example, Sandra, because it's got 2 mistakes in the fact that information is already plural. And I think we have to be aware that we would have to say like some information, or a piece of information, or a report about the information. And then a really good phrase that is nice to use in English would be like up to date. Is this information up to date?
So there are quite a few words for aktuell in German. There are different translations in different contexts as well. So, yeah.
Context is key, as always. Yeah. I think something that is challenging for German speakers, which I see a lot, is the tenses. Because they don't align as well. So, for example, the present perfect and the past simple causes a lot of confusion. So instead of saying like, I have seen him yesterday, because in German you need the 2 parts to make the past tense. Past tense. Ich habe ihn gesehen. And you think, okay, I need the habe, have, and then gesehen, saw. But this doesn't work in English. We can just use the past simple. And I saw him yesterday is perfectly adequate. We do use the present perfect, but it's when we're connecting the past to the present. So I have worked here for 10 years, for example. So yeah, like don't overcomplicate it. Don't take the German literally. And if in doubt, try and use a simple tense where possible, because it makes it just a lot easier.
Yes, and the present perfect is in effect a tense that German hasn't really got, because it doesn't make that connection to the present by using a particular tense, but you would always add an adverb, and you might say schon or something that brings it closer to the present, or again seit 3 Jahren, etc. But it looks so similar, like the example that you gave, ich habe gesehen and I have seen. So I think for me personally, also as a learner, that was really tricky to get my head around. And I see this a lot also with my students who are learning German. So those two tenses can be hugely confusing. But like with anything, take your time. We don't always pick these types of things up initially when we start to learn a new language. And that's perfectly normal. So what about moving on a bit from grammar topics? What about spelling, Megan? Is there anything you need to watch out for?
Yeah, I think the capitalization is important, because in German, I feel like you guys just throw capital letters around and you go, yeah, we'll just have them in every word. And we don't use them half as much in English. So we don't need them for nouns. We don't need them for a lot of the things that are used in German. And it's mainly for names or for official places, like countries or cities or company names, brands, things like this. But for regular words, then we don't need the capitals.
A very good tip there. So a lot easier in English anyway, right?
Yes, but the capital I is often forgotten when we're writing in English.
Yes.
I don't know why the I is always capitalized, but it is. Even if it's in the middle of the sentence, it's important to use the capital for the pronoun for yourself.
Yeah, makes you more important, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. I guess the last thing I would add, you talked about it earlier, is idioms. And I love idioms. I'm a nerd for languages, but don't translate them directly, because it just sounds completely crazy. It can be quite funny if you speak both languages and you know what's happening. But if you're in an international setting where people have no idea what you're talking about, it causes a lot more problems than it's worth. So I hear a lot like, oh, I press my thumbs for you, like ich drückte die Daumen. But in English, we would say, I cross my fingers for you for luck. So things like this. Try and learn the idioms in the target language rather than your own.
Yeah. And they're really great if you can use them correctly, but also if you feel a bit unsure about them, don't feel you have to use them initially, and keep it simple. You can say things in a different way, but learning idiomatic expressions really is when you've already got quite a high level of English. And no rush, but just be aware that they're very different. And perhaps we could share some further tips to avoid the types of mistakes in the future. And if I can summarize a bit what you've just said, I think one of the key points is that one shouldn't think in the target language. One should think in the target language, and one shouldn't translate word for word. So where possible, try and put your English hat on. And try and notice patterns in communication. So if you hear somebody speak, a native English speaker, how are the tenses used? What phrases do they use that you'd like to pick up on? And maybe ask, can you explain to me, how do you use that correctly? So listen actively to English speakers, and also copy maybe their rhythm and their expressions. And no harm, asking any questions. People tend to be very much willing to help.
They might not be able to explain it if it's their native language. I will point that out. If you ask an English speaker, oh, why do we do this? Most of them will not know.
That's very true. Yes. Not about grammatical structures. Yes, but they might be able to explain what a word means, right? If you're not so sure about the meaning.
I think it's nice because you get to share this together about the complexities and idiosyncrasies of language, and actually, why do we say this? Sometimes my clients understand better than a lot of native speakers I know, because they have studied it and they learn the rules. And I think that's actually sometimes a benefit that you have with learning a language. You know why these things work.
Yeah. What else could one do to sort of try and avoid mistakes in the future?
Yeah, I think you'll see it with your clients as well, like getting feedback from a coach or a colleague, especially in speaking, maybe even writing, just to be able to get that natural material. So the feedback is really timely and really personalized and really important. And then if you're having coaching or lessons with somebody like us, then there's going to be more of exposure to this natural material. Normally we do listening exercises and we play podcasts or we watch videos, and you get to experience what it's like to hear that natural rhythm of the language. I always say that it's important to learn like the chunks of the words instead of the individual words, because we've seen the problems that causes. But if you can learn the phrase, for example, I look forward to, and learn it together like that, then it's going to be a lot more helpful going forward. But yeah, patience is a big one, Sandra. You can vouch for that, I'm sure.
Yes, and what we're doing here is really sort of trying to help you in the long term. So if you're watching this, don't feel, oh dear, I shouldn't be doing this anymore. It takes time. It's a process, learning a language, and making mistakes is part of it. But absolutely, don't beat yourself up about making mistakes, but focus on, being patient and being consistent. And fluency comes with time, but make sure maybe also that you don't get sort of held back by perfection. It's not about being perfect and not making any mistakes. It's about speaking even maybe when you don't think you're ready yet to use a particular new structure. Just try it out, and with time you will develop that fluency, but it comes with regular exposure and practice.
What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
Famous last word.
How about a mini challenge, Meg? I would like to give you a phrase that I think is English, and perhaps you could check it and, if necessary, correct.
Yeah, perfect. We're getting revenge from last time.
So we see us tomorrow. Wir sehen uns morgen.
Yeah. So we need to say we see each other tomorrow. We do have the word us in English, but it functions differently. And we need a different reflexive here. So we see each other tomorrow.
Das macht Sinn, oder? That makes sense, or?
Oh my gosh, I hear this one all the time. Adding or onto the end is very German trait. And we would say probably more in English, does that make sense? If you want to add it on the end and have it as a tag question, we would say right, to check that that's actually what's happening. Yeah. You want to go to the cinema, right? And just kind of give that, but we wouldn't use or.
And I think people are often aware of this, and they know that there are these question tags that you can add. And again, there, it's not as straightforward as it looks. So you want to confirm if the information you've got is correct. So you're talking about somebody and you say, he speaks French, isn't it? Or she has 2 dogs, isn't she?
Yeah, so it's really important to use the right verb that we're tagging onto the end. So he speaks French, doesn't he? Because we're saying a positive statement, he speaks French. So then we add the negative, the tag on the end. Yeah, doesn't he? For the example with the dogs, the verb is to have. So then the tag on the end, he has 2 dogs, doesn't he? Hasn't he? Or doesn't he? Just to make that a little bit clearer.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that explanation. So yeah, that's something that German just covers with one word: Oder.
So much easier. I wish we had it in English, honestly. Sometimes I find myself saying it and it's like, oh no, that's English. You have to stop.
Ja, lass uns eine Pause machen. Let's make a pause.
Yeah, sounds great in English, but it just it doesn't really work. We would probably say let's pause or let's take a break.
Und mein Chef ist eine sympathische Person. My chef is a sympathetic person.
Yeah, chef is definitely a false friend here. And it would be my boss is a kind or a nice person. We don't use the word sympathetic quite as much as is used in German. It's more of like identifying with somebody's feelings rather than just being a generally nice, lovely person.
Okay, so going back to become, ich habe einen neuen Minijob bekommen. I became a new minijob.
Yeah, so two things here. Become is get. So I got, and then mini job doesn't really exist in the UK or in lots of English speaking countries. So I would probably describe it as a student job or a part-time job. I got a new student job. That's a good one.
Okay, and now after chatting, I'd like to say to you, Megan, danke. Ich lade dich auf einen Kaffee ein. I'll invite you for this coffee.
I got so confused by this when I lived in Germany because an invitation in English is just like, okay, let's go and do this together. Like, this is an opportunity for us to spend time together. But in German, it means like, I'll pay for you. And there's definitely a monetary meaning involved. So if you want to express the same thing in English, probably say like, oh, the coffee's on me, or Sandra, it's my treat. I'll get it this time.
Yeah. So very different. Okay.
Yeah, I like it. So how would you summarize all of this that we've talked about today?
Yeah, I think being aware is a fantastic first step, and realizing that small changes lead to better communication, especially in a business environment where you're dealing with international teams. So try and think wherever you can in the target language and not in your native language. And I think also, Megan, you have got a book recommendation. Is that right?
Yes. If you want to learn more and you're interested in this topic, I have this cool book. It's actually a zweisprachiges Buch. So you can flip it. On one side is in English, on one side is in German. And it just shares some of the fun and the humor and makes it a little bit more lighthearted to share like how the idioms work and how the structures work across both languages. So I can include more details in the comments if anyone's interested in that.
Yeah, I'll definitely have a look at that. And how can our viewers catch up on this or other recordings?
Yeah, so they're all on LinkedIn, and I've uploaded them to YouTube as well. We've talked about like fluency today and perfectionism, and we've spoken about that in the past. So if you've missed any of them, then that's a great place to catch up and find out more. I can't believe this is our last LinkedIn Live for this year, Sandra.
I know. It's gone really quickly, hasn't it? 2025 is nearly over, but we promise we'll be back in 2026. In January, we'll publish the date on LinkedIn, and it'll be on using either German or English for professional purposes, and what to focus on if you're using the language in the workplace, or if you'd like to start using the language in the workplace, because I think that's often something where people get a bit scared, thinking, oh, I can't do this, professional German, professional English. But, it may be a lot easier than you think. So again, we'll be sharing some really useful tips there, and are already looking forward to seeing you again in the new year. So all the best, happy Christmas, and see you in 2026.
Ja, perfekt. Vielen Dank.
Okay, tschüss.